All right, get ready, because today we're diving deep into true crime, FBI style.
Yeah, we're going deep into two cases, not just skimming the surface, but really getting into the details.
Trying to understand what happened, why it matters, even today.
What I find fascinating is, how these cases show the human side of the headlines,
It's not just the facts.
the desperation of the inmates.
Yeah, the incredible courage of law enforcement.
And these events just kind of ripple out and affect everyone involved.
Exactly. It's those choices people made, the consequences they face, and, of course, those what-ifs that keep us up at night.
Right.
Our source today is a YouTube video, a really great overview of some incredible FBI cases. We're going to unpack it all.
These retellings are accurate but concise.
Yes.
We're going to add context and analysis.
We're going to give the full picture.
Right.
Okay, let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
Our first stop. 1987, the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary.
Oh, yeah.
This wasn't just any prison, right?
You
This one housed some of the most notorious criminals,
Absolutely.
including a significant number of Cuban detainees.
Right. And to understand this whole situation, you have to go back a little bit.
Okay.
Back to 1980.
Okay.
Over 120,000 Cuban refugees fled to Florida.
Wow.
And the U.S. government classified some as criminals or mentally ill,
Okay.
so they ended up in federal prisons.
Which were already overcrowded.
Exactly. So you can imagine just this tension simmering.
Right. You've got a powder keg ready to blow.
Absolutely.
And then in 87, the U.S. and Cuba, they signed a treaty to send some of these detainees back.
And that was the spark.
That was it.
That ignited the riots.
It's crazy how that one event can trigger such widespread unrest.
It's fascinating, yeah.
So you had riots break out in Oakdale, Louisiana,
Uh-huh.
and Atlanta, Georgia, almost simultaneously.
Yeah, almost at the same time.
We're focusing on Atlanta, where things just escalated.
Dramatically.
Over 100 guards and employees taken hostage.
It's a hostage situation now.
The video describes the scene inside as just pure chaos.
Oh, yeah.
Fires, makeshift weapons, this constant threat of violence,
Right.
especially from this guy, this inmate,
Oh, notorious.
Thomas Silverstein.
The Thomas Silverstein.
He was already serving multiple life sentences for killing a guard and another inmate.
Mm-hmm.
How did his presence affect the situation?
Well, Silverstein being there just added another, layer of complexity and danger for the negotiators.
There?
I mean, his reputation for violence, he was a wild card.
Yeah,
And the FBI had to consider, how he might react
of course.
to any attempts they made to regain control.
Then you've got the media coverage of the riot, and that actually makes things worse.
Oh, yeah.
There's a moment where a reporter mistakenly says that the FBI is about to storm the prison.
Oh, wow.
And the rioters, they're listening to the news. They're ready to retaliate.
Oh, man.
That's just scary how a simple mistake can have these dire consequences.
Absolutely. It highlights how crucial, accurate information is in these situations.
Sure.
A single miscommunication, can have a butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Lead to unintended violence, put lives at risk. It also makes you think about, the ethics for journalists
Oh, absolutely.
covering these events.
The FBI had so many challenges in this. The prison itself, it was designed to keep people in, not out.
Right.
Then you have the Posse Comitatus Act.
Yeah, that really limits their options.
Limits the use of the military within the U.S.
So they can't just call in the army.
And you can't bring in the big guns.
Right.
The FBI really had to rely on their own resources and tactics here.
It's worth noting that the Posse Comitatus Act was enacted after the Civil War
Okay.
to prevent the federal government from, using the military to enforce domestic law.
Interesting.
So in this case, the FBI, they're on their own.
They couldn't even call in their elite hostage rescue team.
HRT.
They were deployed to the Oakdale riot.
Right, already busy.
So then there's this agonizing decision not to rescue 27 employees.
Oh, wow.
They had barricaded themselves in the prison hospital.
I can't imagine the weight of that choice.
I can't either.
Leaving people in danger, but also...
Weighing that against the potential for even greater loss of life.
Exactly.
If a rescue attempt just provoked the rioters.
It's a classic ethical dilemma in these hostage situations.
For sure.
Balancing the immediate needs of a few
Yeah.
against the safety of the many.
They had to trust their judgment and hope for the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Meanwhile, they had Special Agent D. Rosario. He's working around the clock negotiating with these rioters.
He's a smart guy.
Instead of just demanding surrender, he focuses on building relationships.
Interesting.
He used the detainees' mail as a bargaining chip,
Oh, wow.
offering it in exchange for cooperation. That seems risky. Could the rioters have seen that as a sign of weakness?
That's a great question. It's this delicate balance in any negotiation. You want to show you're willing to compromise, but also you need to project strength and resolve.
Right.
So Agent Di Rosario, he's walking a tightrope here,
Mm-hmm.
trying to appeal to the humanity
Yeah.
without appearing vulnerable.
Yeah. It's just a fascinating example of this psychology,
Oh, yeah.
involved in these hostage negotiations.
It wasn't just about talking, though.
Right?
FBI Tactical Commander Danny Coulson
Okay.
decided to stage a show of force,
Oh, really?
letting the rioters see the firepower if things went south. That seems like a dangerous tactic.
Absolutely.
Didn't they risk escalating the situation?
Yeah, it was a calculated risk for sure.
Yeah,
Designed to show, hey, we have the capability.
right.
And we're willing to use force.
If necessary.
It's a tactic called force projection.
Okay.
And it's often used in these crisis situations to, deter aggression, encourage compliance.
Right.
However, there's always that danger, right?
Yeah.
It could backfire, prompt a violent reaction.
Instead of the desired outcome.
Exactly.
So in this case, it seems it contributed to the peaceful resolution.
Hopefully, yeah.
Definitely a high-stakes gamble.
High stakes.
After 12 tense days, the standoff finally ended peacefully. Thank goodness.
All hostages released unharmed. Part of the agreement. A promise of immigration hearings for these detainees.
Oh, wow.
Must have been a huge relief for them.
Absolutely. It's interesting how this case highlights the complexities of immigration policy. These detainees, they were caught in this bureaucratic limbo,
Yeah?
facing this repatriation to a country they fled years earlier.
Yeah.
Their desperation, frustration, it undoubtedly contributed to the riot.
Right.
And the promise of these hearings, it offered them some hope
A little glimmer of hope.
in this seemingly hopeless situation.
The Atlanta prison riot had a lasting impact.
Absolutely.
Raised public awareness
Uh-huh.
about the Cuban detainees' plight.
Right.
Led to changes in prison security protocols.
Important changes.
A reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, positive change is possible.
Absolutely. And while the Atlanta riot showcased, the challenges of managing a large-scale crisis,
Right.
our next case takes us into a different scenario,
Good.
a focused manhunt.
Okay, let's shift gears and dive into that next case.
This case takes us to the New Mexico Penitentiary,
Okay.
July 4th, 1987.
Wow, Independence Day.
All days, 7 inmates make a daring escape,
Wow.
led by William Gilbert, a 4-time murderer.
Oh, wow. I bet that holiday just added to the chaos. This wasn't just a casual walkout, was it? How did they manage to do it?
They exploited some serious security flaws.
Okay.
They had a smuggled gun,
Oh, wow.
and there was no guard in the watchtower.
Wow, so these vulnerabilities just turned a supposedly impenetrable facility
Right.
into an escape route.
Exactly.
That's a huge oversight.
Yeah.
I imagine the response was swift
Oh, yeah.
and massive.
Absolutely. Roadblocks went up, canine units, helicopters, even the National Guard joined the search.
Wow.
Public was on high alert, especially because one of the escapees, James Kinslow, was a known serial rapist and killer.
Oh, wow.
They really hammered home how dangerous these guys were.
Yeah, it must have been just a race against time. I'm guessing investigators, they had to go beyond just a physical search.
You're right, they had to get smart.
Yeah.
They started digging into prison records, conducting these carefully timed interviews with other inmates,
Okay.
so they wouldn't tip anyone off.
Right.
And they were chasing down every lead,
Yeah.
trying to figure out, okay, where might these guys be headed?
The video mentioned the escapees' trail going cold after they crossed Interstate 25. It sounds like they vanished.
Mm-hmm.
How did the investigators break through that?
This is where human intelligence becomes so crucial.
Okay.
One of the escapees, David Gogos, he breaks into a house
Okay.
and steals only bread.
What? Why just bread? I mean, that's not the typical loop.
Exactly. It suggested this desperation,
Right.
A need to stay under the radar.
He was starving.
Maybe starving, yeah. Took a risk just for basic sustenance.
Right.
And this insight, it shifted their focus.
Okay.
And ultimately led to a major break in the case.
The video talks about the capture of Robert Davis, another one of the escapees. How did that change things?
Davis spilled the beans. He revealed that Gilbert, Kinslow, and Gagos were working together.
Okay.
They had help from a relative of Gagos on the outside
Okay.
and were planning to head to California.
Wow.
This intel gave the FBI the leverage they needed.
So the FBI stepped in at that point, which must have expanded the search considerably.
Right. They issued unlawful flight complaints,
Okay.
extending the search nationwide.
Okay.
They focused on finding this storage unit.
Okay.
They believed the escapees were using. They were so close to catching them, but the storage unit's records, they had been misplaced.
Oh, no.
It was just a frustrating near miss.
I can imagine, like, being that close.
Yeah.
And then it just slips through your fingers because of a clerical error. But the manhunt continues, and things take a dark turn with James Kinslow.
Yes, Kinslow kidnapped a family in Arizona. He eventually released the parents, but he kept their 11-year-old daughter hostage.
Oh, gosh. That poor girl. What a terrifying ordeal. What happened?
So, in an incredible act of bravery, the girl managed to escape
Wow.
and alert the police. This led to Kinslow's capture in Garden Grove, California.
Okay.
They found him with a loaded .357 Magnum,
Wow.
so it could have ended much worse.
Yeah.
But under pressure, he finally revealed the location of Gilbert and Gagos.
So they were hiding out in California all along. Sounds like the FBI used Kinslow's capture to their advantage.
They did. They tracked Gilbert and Gagos to a motel in Garden Grove,
Okay.
and they planned this strategic raid.
Okay.
Carefully, considering, the risks to bystanders.
Right.
The raid was successful.
Good.
And after 27 days on the run, all 7 escapees were back in custody.
What a whirlwind.
Right.
We got riots, escapes, high-speed chases. Sounds like the FBI had their hands full in 1987.
It was a busy year for them.
Yeah.
These cases highlight, the unpredictable nature of these events and just the need for adaptability, resilience in law enforcement.
Before we move on, what stands out to you about this New Mexico penitentiary escape?
It's a reminder that these seemingly insignificant details can make all the difference.
Right.
The stolen bread, the misplaced file.
Yeah.
These small events had a huge impact on the outcome.
It really shows how these investigations rely on both meticulous work and a bit of luck.
Speaking of luck, our next case features this bank robber
Okay.
who seemed to have plenty of it, at least for a while.
Okay.
This one's a bit different. It involves a bank robber who cultivated this Robin Hood image.
Okay, a bank robber with a public persona. Let's dive into that. So this bank robber fashions himself as a Robin Hood figure. What's the story here?
This is the case of Byron Chubbuck.
Okay.
He operated in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay.
And he was connected to this Brewtown gang.
Okay.
They were known for their loyalty and keeping their mouths shut.
Okay.
And what's fascinating is how this case, kind of evolved.
Okay.
It started with these, seemingly routine bank robberies and escalated into, shootouts and escapes and even a bizarre media stunt.
Sounds like he had a flair for the dramatic.
When did this all start?
It all kicked off December of 1998.
Okay.
Chubbuck hits 2 banks in a single day.
Wow.
And right from the start, he was incredibly careful.
Really?
No fingerprints, no DNA.
Wow.
He even managed to avoid, being clearly caught on security cameras.
He sounds like a ghost. How did the FBI even begin to investigate someone like that?
They got a lead on a car with Nevada plates.
Okay.
But it turned out to be registered to a guy in Wyoming who had this rock-solid alibi.
Wow.
And he told him he let his ex-wife, Carita, use the car.
Okay.
And she lived in Albuquerque.
So the FBI interviewed Carita.
They did, but she claimed, she was at work during the robberies.
Okay.
And had no idea who could have borrowed her car.
Okay.
So they suspected a connection, but they couldn't prove it.
So they kept her on their radar, just in case.
Okay.
And then a few months later, the robberies continue.
Right.
But the robber's behavior, it changes.
Okay.
He's becoming more aggressive, jumping counters, forcing tellers to empty multiple drawers.
Okay.
Almost as if he was on drugs.
Yeah.
And he starts claiming that he's giving the money to these starving children in Mexico.
Was there any truth to that?
It was a bizarre twist that caught the media's attention.
Sure.
And the FBI, always keen on, using publicity to their advantage.
Of course.
They start calling him Robin Hood.
Okay.
But they suspected the money was, funding something else, maybe a drug habit, other criminal activity.
Right. I can see how the media just ate that up. But it sounds like it didn't help the FBI catch him.
No, despite stakeouts, tips, even using this media attention, they couldn't pin him down.
Okay.
Then, 8 months after those initial robberies, Carita, the ex-wife,
Yeah.
she calls the FBI. claiming to have information that would crack this case wide open.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
What did she tell them?
She identified the robber as her husband,
Okay.
Byron Chubbuck,
Okay.
from the bank photos.
Okay.
And she said he was part of that Brewtown gang.
Right.
She was scared. She claimed, Chubbuck had become increasingly violent,
Okay.
had threatened her and their unborn child.
Oh, wow. So she's pregnant, fearing for her life, and finally decides to turn him in. This sounds intense.
It gets even more dramatic.
Okay.
The agents, they arranged to meet Carita at her apartment.
Right.
And during the interview, guess who shows up?
Chubbuck.
Exactly. Carita sees him through the window. The agents were there to arrest him, but they didn't want to trigger a violent confrontation with Carita right there in the apartment.
Sure.
So they make this split-second decision to hide in the bedroom,
Okay.
hoping to, avoid this direct confrontation.
Right.
But it didn't go as planned.
What happened?
Chubbuck must have sensed something was wrong.
Yeah.
And he starts firing through the bedroom wall.
Oh, my gosh.
It was pure chaos, bullets flying, agents pinned down.
Wow.
A pregnant woman caught in the crossfire.
Oh, gosh.
Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt.
That's incredible. Did they manage to arrest him?
Not right away. He fled the apartment, but the police, they had surrounded the building,
Okay.
and they tried to negotiate, but he wasn't responding.
Right.
After a 3-hour standoff, he tries to escape through another apartment,
Oh, wow.
and they finally subdued him.
So Robin Hood is finally caught.
Yeah.
End of story.
Not quite.
Oh, no.
He pleaded guilty to 14 bank robberies, assaulting federal agents,
Wow.
and got a 40-year sentence.
Wow.
But then in December of 2000, he decides to withdraw his guilty plea.
Okay.
That meant he had to attend this court hearing.
Okay.
And during transport, he managed to escape.
He escaped again. How did he do that?
He used the smuggled handcuff key to unlock his restraints and kicked out a van window.
Oh, my God.
So another massive manhunt.
Wow.
They suspected he might have fled to Mexico.
Okay.
But after a few weeks of silence, he resurfaces
Okay.
in a truly audacious way.
Okay. I got to hear this. What did he do?
He contacted a local radio station
Okay.
and demanded an interview
Wow.
in exchange for surrendering.
Wow.
And he wanted to use this platform to complain about, law enforcement,
Oh, wow.
claiming they were out to get him.
He's playing the victim card after all that.
It was a risky move for the station.
Yeah.
But they agreed, hoping it would lead to a peaceful resolution.
Right.
And during the interview, he just ranted about, the FBI, the police.
Okay.
But this publicity stunt backfired.
How so?
The FBI now had a recording of his voice
Okay.
and a letter he'd sent to the station,
Okay.
which had his fingerprint on it.
Right.
And they traced this letter to another Brewtown gang member,
Okay.
Ronald Baker.
Okay.
They put Baker under surveillance.
Okay. And suspected Chubbuck was hiding in his trailer.
I'm guessing they didn't just knock on the door.
You're right. They sent an informant wearing a wire into the trailer
Okay.
to gather evidence.
Right.
Police then surround the trailer.
Okay.
Chubbuck resists, leads to this car chase, final confrontation.
So how did it all end for our Robin Hood wannabe?
The police stopped his car,
Right.
but he was armed and ready to fight.
Okay.
During the struggle, he was shot in the chest but survived.
Oh, wow.
He's arrested along with Baker,
Okay.
and this time, no more escapes.
What a wild ride. He really went to extremes to avoid facing the consequences of his actions.
Absolutely. Chubbuck's case really highlights these challenges law enforcement face when dealing with, determined criminals
Right.
who are well-connected.
Yeah.
They had to adapt their strategies, use every tool at their disposal,
Yeah.
including publicity,
Right.
to bring him to justice.
These cases, they show how unpredictable and, frankly, terrifying these situations can be. Absolutely.
But they also reveal the incredible bravery and dedication
Of everyone involved.
of everyone involved, yeah.
What stood out to you the most?
I keep thinking about that storage unit hole
Oh, yeah.
in the New Mexico case.
Right.
They were so close
They're that close.
to catching those escapees weeks earlier. It's
Yeah.
just wild.
Right. It raises a fascinating question.
Yeah.
How different would things have been if they'd found that storage unit?
Right.
It highlights the role of chance and timing.
Totally. And for me, what stands out is the role of human intelligence and persistence. In both of these cases, the breakthroughs came from witnesses,
Right.
informants, and the tireless efforts of law enforcement.
It really makes you realize how these events are shaped by these individual choices
Absolutely.
and actions.
And sometimes just plain luck.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Another deep dive
Into the world of true crime.
with the FBI.
We'll be back soon with more captivating cases and expert analysis.
See you then.